Good morning, everybody. Bonjour. Tilmanam. Yate Bennett. I want to say thank you for joining us. Can everybody hear me okay? I see some heads shaking, so that's a good sign. We've been having some minor technical difficulties, but we're very glad that you've joined us for today's session with Native Food as Medicine. And as we're slowly starting to admit folks into the session, again, I want to say thank you for joining us. We'll go through a few housekeeping guidelines in a few moments, but we have a wonderful opportunity this morning to gather and listen and learn and share, because we'll have some different activities going on throughout the session for Native Food as Medicine, providing emotional resilience support for our AN youth. It's so important that we look at the healing power of food and how through what we not only do during our daily lives, but what we ingest, what we put into our bodies has an impact on how we feel, what we think, how we express ourselves, and the mental health that it provides, the mental wellness that it can provide for us when we take care of ourselves. And just so that you know, these sessions are born out of several conversations, as well as the one-day opportunity that we had back in May, where we were focusing on healthcare, self-care, mental wellness, all these wonderful ideas that we know are so important to ourselves, so that when we serve our Native youth and their families in a K through 12 setting, that we are our best so we can serve them in the best way possible. So I want to say thank you again to everybody who's here participating. And I'm going to begin our slideshow. If you want to put where you're coming from in the chat box, that'd be great. What tribal community you serve. That'd be really wonderful to see who we're serving today throughout this session. I'm hoping y'all can see this screen with me today. It's going to be a PowerPoint that I will begin, and then I'll turn this over to our presenter, and then she will have her own presentation to share with you. And keep in mind that as we go through this morning session, Native Food as Medicine, providing emotional resilience support for our American Indian, Alaska Native youth through the healing power of food. This is just the first of many sessions that we're going to be having as a follow-up throughout the summer in partnership. And this is a new partnership that was just created recently with the PTTC office. So you may be serving in that capacity also with the Prevention Technology Transfer Center, as well as our Mental Health Technology Transfer Center with the K through 12 supplement. So we have two offices sponsoring this event so that we can reach more folks serving our young people and their families. If you look at this map, this gives you an idea of the different communities that we serve. We are one of two national offices that serves a specific community. For our office that is housed at the University of Iowa with the Native Center for Behavioral Health in the College of Public Health, we specifically serve Native communities, American Indian and Alaska Native children and their families. We are supported by a grant from SAMHSA, and so it's really important that you know that the content of this event is the creation of our presenter, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native MHTTC. There are a couple of things that we're going to ask that you help us with at the end of today's event. We'll have some follow-up with emails to you all. If you've registered, or any of your friends have registered, or your coworkers have registered, families have registered, anybody who's registered will get the links to the presentation afterwards, as well as any resources that our presenter has available for everybody. Those will be sent in a follow-up email to each of you. In addition to that, though, we do have our link to our survey, which is really important to us. What it helps us do, and I have the codes here for you on the screen. There's that QR code if you want to take your phone and screenshot that. and go directly to it, or you can click on the hyperlink that's on the screen. But what's really important about this survey, a couple of things, is that it is anonymous and it cannot be traced back to you. It does, however, help our funders know the importance of the work that we do, the value that we put on our work with our presenters, the expertise they bring to our communities, and the important way that we can continue serving, or the important ways that we can continue serving our young people in the K through 12 setting and their families. So I want to invite you to please take time after today's session to fill out the GIPRA, either by using the QR code provided or by clicking on the hyperlink. Again, I want to say thank you to everybody who's joining us. It's really important that we come together for the sake of our young people, looking at ways that we can help them be mentally well, mentally healthy, and have wonderful, resilient lives through native food as medicine. As we begin our time today, it's really important that we acknowledge the land and pay respect to the Indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken over and inhabited. I'm going to invite you now to read this document that was created by three of our colleagues, Ella Driscoll, Keely Driscoll, and Sean Bear, all three of whom are from the Meskwaki Nation. Again, thank you for joining us for Native Food is Medicine, providing emotional, resilient support for American Indian and Alaska Native youth. The land acknowledgement that I shared with you was created by some of my team members, and putting on presentations like this has a lot of folks helping out behind the scenes. Not only those three people, but we have our co-director, Teresa Brewington, who oversees the trauma initiative, as well as a co-director for the K-12 supplement. And Bethany Walzak is on the line with us today. She's our graduate research assistant. So it's really important that you know there are several folks helping out behind the scenes, including our IT folks, our communications team. So I want to thank all of them for taking the time to help us and support us in this initiative today. Teresa Brewington, as I mentioned, is the co-director for two centers specifically. She's a member of the Kohari tribe and the Lumbee tribe, and she has served many capacities prior to coming aboard with us. Currently, she resides at the Meskwaki settlement with her family near Iowa. Today's session is really important, as is all our sessions, but I really am excited to have Dr. Casada with us today as we share our cultural connection to food, to apply a balanced way of eating and incorporate Indigenous traditions into our lives, because we know food has healing powers. And so Dr. Casada is going to be sharing with us so that we can become knowledgeable in providing emotional resilient support for our young people. Our school communities will develop healthier eating habits for successful outcomes, not only in the classroom, but out of the classroom when they're home with family and friends. Reflect on our cultural connections to food and discuss the importance of sugar stability in the body as related to mental health support. Together, we'll learn how a balanced way of eating and discuss the roles of stress, sleep, and exercise. So I'm really looking forward, and I want to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Vanessa Casada. She's Kickapoo and Chichimeca. She was born and raised in Yanawana, which many people call San Antonio, Texas. She's done many wonderful things across the globe, including being a messenger runner, a Chusky, for the Peace and Dignity Run, which included 8,000 miles from Alaska down to Panama. And throughout that run, she was able to come in contact and work alongside many different tribal communities. She is a practicing pharmacist and a founder of SanArte Healing and Cultura Clinic. Her work is the intersections of Native traditional healing, food sovereignty, and renewable energy that build life-giving systems. And this is just the first of several sessions that she'll be hosting and leading us through this summer. They'll be held on Thursdays. And I do need to make a correction to myself. If you were here with us on Tuesday this week for a different session, I announced that they would all be in the morning. We are making a slight change to that. They will be held in the afternoons on Thursdays with Dr. Vanessa Casada. And so at this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to her so that she can share her wisdom and her guidance and expertise in the area of healing foods as a practitioner, as a pharmacist, as a person who wants to help our tribal communities lead healthier lives. Dr. Quesada, do you have time, or are you able to screen share? Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Good morning. Okay. I get a little thumbs up if you can see the screen share. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Good morning. I'm super thankful to be here today with each and every one of you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bays, for the invitation to be here, and your whole team who organized and coordinated. Thank you to SAMHSA. Thank you to every single one of you, all of the educators that are sharing the best of yourselves every single day to show up for our future generations and really helping guide them through a really difficult transitional time right now. So I just I have a lot of gratitude and love for each and every one of you in my heart. So my land acknowledgement, is here. I'm located in Yanawana, now known by this area as San Antonio, Texas. We are the home territory of the Coiteco, which is a large umbrella term for about 500 different bands, and the Estokna, who are here and from this territory since time immemorial. And here you'll see a picture of us in ceremony with Coitecos. I'm Chichimeca and Kickapoo, but I've really grown up with them intertribally, and so we have our ceremonies, and just wanted to let you all know where I'm coming from. We are an urban, detribalized group. There are, the Coitecos are state recognized, and there are 3 tribes here in Texas that are recognized federally, Kickapoo being one, but our tribal lands are not here in Texas. We've migrated down, and so I think that's really important to acknowledge. And my family is from Mexico, down on the Coahuila side. So a little bit about me. This is a picture of my family here on the left, and I wanted to start with that. My mom and dad are there on the very left, and then my brother and my sister are here, and then that's me in the back, and then this is my family. We're standing in front of my grandparents' house, and this is really, for me, the heart of who I am. And on the other side of the house in the back is where my grandparents, my dad's a hunter, and so my dad hunts deer, and he learned that from his great grandfather, and or my great grandfather, which is his grandfather. And then my grandparents, his parents, would slice the meat and hang it up in the back, and then we would have our deer jerky for the rest of the year. And they only used salt and pepper, but it was super spicy and super good. And so I always asked, like, if it had anything else, if it had chile or if it had something else going on in there, because it was so delicious. And so this was a picture after their funeral. And so, you know, recognizing their lives and everything that they gave for us to be here. It's really important to me because that is my connection to food, is family and place. In their backyard, they raised goats and chickens, and that's where I got to really interact When I wasn't here in the city, I was there at their house, interacting with the four-leggeds and all the family out there. The picture on the right is us doing a spirit run here in Yanaguana. And every September, we do a 12-mile ancestral run, and we're being led there by our spirit runner elder, David Sandoval. And just to give y'all an idea that we are definitely seated in the city, and that is, it can be a challenging place for us to really connect and remember that connection to our foods. And I think that, I wanted to just start with that so that y'all know where I'm coming from. So for today, we'll do an overview of prayer for the seeds. Why are native foods important? Finding balance in our nervous systems, understanding the mind-gut connection, incredibly important just to give us a foundation when we're working with ourselves or with the youth, right? Why are native foods so important? How can they help us to balance out our nervous system? And sugar dependency, a few things about that, about sugar itself, how it affects our opiate receptors, the involvement. We're not going to go too into depth about the studies, but we will go over some of the main points of what we know based on the studies, right, that reflect what we know and we've seen in our communities as well. We will review the traditional sugars and processed sugars and really start to look at what are the differences and why is that important for us to know. And then we'll move into sugar stabilization. So once we learn all the things that sugar does in our bodies, that we can see how we can balance that with PFC, which we'll be talking about, which is a balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And then lastly, we'll look at traditional food examples. So we're all coming from different territories. We all have different foods that grow in our areas, and really being able to give you all the opportunity to share with each other. What is it that is sacred to your territory? What are the foods that grow that you have a connection with? And we'll get into access and stories and all of that a little bit later. And this is my sister, Tiffany. We call her Turtle Tiff. She's Tewa. And we were both learning at the Indigenous design course, community design course out in Suzuki Pueblo together. So this all starts for me as a prayer for the seeds. So as Dr. Bays mentioned, I am standing in this photo in front with my sister Reb in front of a map of where our run, our sacred run, prayer run went. And we started in Alaska, and where all the photos go is where we ran. I ran specifically down to Panama, and then there was a different route that started at Tierra del Fuego from Argentina and ran up. And every single day for 8 months, we prayed and were led by sacred staffs and connected with different Indigenous communities every single night as we ran anywhere from 100 to 300 miles a day as a group, carrying this prayer and sharing about the importance of protecting the seeds. And I'll never forget when we were in Alaska and we were just getting started and all the nerves were coming up and everything, an elder came up to me and he said, what's the most precious seed that you have to take care of? And there was a healthy silence that, is there with the elders when they ask you a question and you have to think about it. And I asked him which one, and he said the seed of your thought. And because that seed of your thought becomes a word, and that word becomes an action. And so in addition to, I really kept that with me and this kind of started this whole journey and research and sharing about asking, how are our thoughts connected to the seeds, our life givers, that carry the DNA, forward for our communities and our families. How is it all connected? How is it connected that the way that we feel, the way that we think, the way that we act is really connected and dictated and driven by everything that we're taking in through our bodies. So why is native food important? First and foremost, culture, right? This is who we are. These are our ways of connecting to the seeds, the ways the seeds have given to us, the way that we've given to them and taken care of them, our foods, the four-leggeds that we hunt. We all are connected in so many different ways, in ways that we have balance, on the earth. And so much of that has changed over the past 50 years with industrialization, with colonization, with all of the things that have happened, that it's really important. And there are so many people right now that are feeling that need to reconnect with our foods in a way that can help save us. I mean, I've had elders, Uncle Jimmy Blue Eyes, Dine, he said, his mission for his life, one of his main prayers was to bring back the bison to his home territory. And he said, we have a story where these bison are going to help us, bring us back that medicine that we need to live. And so this is the next one, is kinship, right? So in that kinship with the bison, when bringing them back into our territories, I start to think about, he left me with that story. And so it's our job to then start to see, okay, what is that going to take? What does it take for us to rebuild that kinship? What does that look like? How do we bring that into our territory? Who do we need to work with? And all of these ways that the kinship is being reconnected through with other beings, other humans, and other four-leggeds and the rabbits and the elements that give us life, the water, everyone. So that kinship gets restored the more that we start to connect with our foods. Memory. So memory is a big one. Memory is so beautiful in the sense that when we put the seeds under our tongue, it was shared with me that that DNA with our seeds gets recorded, right? It gets recorded into the seeds. So when we plant that seed, everything that we need, the nutrients that we need, all of that gets planted and then grows for us, right? So we have that deep connection of memory to the seeds and to all of our native foods. We need them for our survival. We are in a transitional time, which is extremely intense for the youth, especially now with everything that's been going on, and really being able to reconnect to our foods is helping us in so many ways, not only because the food that's being given to us and processed and offered to us through, since the rations and the commodities are toxic, they're making us sick, and we continue to eat them. And so we really, in order for us to really be able to survive on this planet, it's becoming increasingly important for us to ground into our traditions, our foods, our food ways, and really start to talk about food sovereignty. What does it look like to feed our people? And then lastly, health and healing. So we'll talk about this a little bit more, but our survival we're in survival mode so much throughout our day, and we are really processing so much intergenerational trauma and things that have happened in the boarding schools and for all of our ancestors and our people. Here in Yanawana, we have a mission history that was very violent, very brutal. And so it's really important for us to remember that we have the power to heal ourselves, to heal 7 generations back and forward. And that this is what gives us life. This is what gives us the, in Spanish we say ánimo, but this is what gives us the inspiration to continue forward for future generations. And that in every moment we have that capacity to heal. And by eating our traditional foods, that is one of the strongest ways that we can heal and come together. All right. Why native food? So number one, we started talking about it restores our kinship to the land and for us to be in right relations. Here, about an hour and a half away driving from us in Wilder, Texas, Lucille Contreras of the Lipan Apaches she is reconnecting our kinship to the bison, to the buffalo, and has created the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project as a huge prayer and a lift for all of us in this region, and to be able to restore that connection with the bison. How do they move? What do they need? How are we in right relations with them? And that has been an incredible lift and incredible teachings of what that requires and how much support, and how it's also become this beautiful open place for all tribes, because some of our tribes, many of us, we have splits that happen or divisions or all of these things. And so, one of the purposes of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project is a place that all of our bands, all of us are the same people, right? That we can all come together and we can put our differences aside and really focus on what's important for our future and how we are going to embody this unity, this peace and dignity that we are living and taking steps in our daily life to achieve. Physiology. So it's also important because our physiology is changing and connected to the food that we eat and to our land. And so for this Indigenous Sustainable Community Design course with the Suzuki Pueblo, we got to meet Roxanne Swensel, and she is one of the authors of the Pueblo Food Experience. And so what they did was they had their people, and there have been several of these different, I don't want to say studies, but practices that have been done all over, but of people that start to eat their traditional foods that come from their territory. And that one of the most amazing things that she shared was that 20 generations of our DNA, it takes 20 generations of our DNA to adapt to a location. So, so many people are moving at this point. Our migration is changing. Our tribes are moving from or being dislocated, so how does that affect our digestion? If we need to be in the same place for 20 generations for us to adapt our digestion, to be able to adapt to those foods, it's really important for us to recognize that, so that we can understand why it's important to ingest our native foods. And then lastly, it's a powerful way to heal ourselves in community. So as we cook these foods together, as we share them, as we are hanging out in the kitchen, while we're cooking, listening to auntie stories, the grandmas, and the elders sharing, that tends to be the heart of our. We talk about taking care of our home fire. That's the heart of our community. Really, is there gathering and sharing and being able to also feed ourselves after our ceremonies. There were several staffs that we received on the Peace and Dignity journeys that were prayers for the youth, and the prayers that the youth would come back to these ceremonies, because we have so many meth epidemics happening all over our tribal lands. And that, Chief Alexis specifically had a very strong prayer, and the tribes at Onion Lake as well, for the youth to come back to the ceremonies, for that to be where we learn. That's where we learn and take that medicine out and help to ground them, so they're not getting distracted by substances, and just remembering how to feel held right there in ceremony. And so afterwards we have the feeding and the gathering. And so being able to celebrate together, right, is another part of the work that we have ahead of us, that it's fun, right? It doesn't all have to be a heavy lift. It can be celebrating, it can be sharing. So I would like this to be our first breakout group, because these are only a few of the reasons of why native foods are important. So I want to ask Bethany to please help us with the breakout groups, so that folks can get to know each other and share, why are native foods important to you? What are some stories that you have in your family, or ways that you share food with each other? And then we'll give that about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back afterwards and share. And let us know when you're ready, Bethany.
So at this time, please make sure that you join a breakout room. I believe there's 5 available for you, maybe a few more. Let me see. Oh, there actually are a few more.
All right, looks like folks are coming back. Wanted to give folks an opportunity to share, either to speak and share a few words, or type in the chat what was shared in your group.
Are you inviting us to share, Vanessa?
Sure. Yes,
Okay, so
please.
Ayuhuinek now Bessie Shorty. I'm from the Yurok tribe in Northern California. It's about 30 minutes south of the Oregon border along the Pacific coast. And it was shared that well, there was 3 of us in the group. It was shared that when our families cook traditional foods, it's appreciated. And some of the foods, we enjoy eating. It was also shared that traditional practices of hunting is appreciated, and learning from friends, like other tribal members, how they do their traditional hunting, and giving thanks, and their protocol is appreciated. And then also it was shared the different types of I guess hazmat of gathering, from like the marijuana grows, how they're growing on our traditional gathering grounds, and then also non-natives gathering our traditional foods. So we have to strategically plan where to gather, how much to gather, and then always be mindful of when our elders are gathering, that they are to gather closer to the starting of the trails, of our gathering trails, and then the younger people should be gathering further out on our traditional gathering trails. So here in Northern California, though, we gather seaweed, teas, mussels, clams. We have rivers full of salmon and steelhead and trout. And then we have our deer meat, elk meat and stuff. And I gather pretty much seasonally. Everything in my family evolves around seasons, from berries, and we're always looking. And with the global warming, our seasons have been changing here. And so that was kind of shared as well in our group. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bessie. So you brought up a lot of really good points of how our territories are changing. Even Alaska, they weren't able to grow seeds 10 years ago, and now they are. And also access, to gathering sites, and really prioritizing the elders. I love that. I love that. We have a few shares in the chat. Does anyone else want to share? Have one more share. I know some folks aren't able to maybe unmute, have other things going on as well.
I know, like, one thing that I didn't share in our breakout session was, like, I know that there's traditional ways to gather the foods. And so I want to learn more on those things. on what is, and even how, like, planting my garden, it's different this year for me, because this year I'm using more of the Three Sisters. Then, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. So then, just learning from the community and from others around me on, how to plant, how to gather. I want to know how to dry more than just canning anymore. So, just all those things that I was never taught before. I'm excited to learn more now about those things and the customs, and just, my husband's Puerto Rican, so he's Islander, but I love all the native culture. So I have it all over my house. I have, I smudge, I have sweetgrass, I believe in God too, but I don't believe that it needs to be like this. I believe that we should keep our minds open, and that we can gather from many different things. So I just really enjoy everything that I learn, and I'm trying to learn just as much as I can.
Thank you, Marcy. Yes, there's so much for us to relearn. And, who do we go to for that? The elders, and who knows how to do those things? How can you reconnect with them in your community, and do this in a respectful way, right? Definitely respecting where things come from, and the lineage, always, so that you're doing it, with a good heart and with permission. Thank you for sharing. Rachel shares in the group that one thing was learned after ceremonials, preparing enough for anyone who would come eat, and so that they could eat as much as they like. Jacqueline, Mark, medicine foods and indigenous teachings and ways of living kept our people well for centuries. You share about reconnecting with our traditional places, like eating sacred foods, doing traditional movements, singing our songs, speaking our languages. We can mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually strong, keep us strong. We need more teachings about this. Nyawin, Nalitsam. Yes, that's something, our languages. Yes, how that our foods connect us to our languages as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Learning from others, because our elders are no longer around. One of the other things that comes to mind is like learning from other elders from other tribes as well. My sister Glenda, who's Cree, they wanted to bring back the songs from the seeds, and so they asked the Miami tribe permission to use that seed to replant it and ask for that prayer, to receive those songs again. And so, our tribes have exchanged for thousands of years, but again, it's about being respectful and honoring that lineage. Thank you for sharing, everyone. We'll have 2 more breakout groups. I'm glad that Katana said y'all like them, and hopefully, because there's so much wisdom here, not just, there's so many, all of us have a piece of the puzzle, right? And everything that we're facing. So I appreciate that we get to interact. So the youth and the children, what are some of the challenges that they're going through? So there's so many stressors that we know that they're going through. The family instabilities, substance abuse within our families, dependency, extractive labor, right? So living in a capitalist colonial system, lots of us are working. We're working 2 and 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and to have access to clean water. And and then that's not even enough sometimes, and there's also the extractive labor in a sense of, like, so many of us are having to go so far away from our tribal lands to work and to sustain our families through this system, that, we're away from our children, we're away from our youth, we're away from this like family and this community, and the land that gives us life. Overwhelm, the youth right now are going through an extraordinary amount of overwhelm, far surpassing anything that we even had to do. Physiologically, our bodies are being overwhelmed by social media, which is one of them, that we're taking in so much information. We have access to everything that's going on all around the world, and that we're taking that in, and how that causes stress in our bodies. It causes stress, especially in the youth that don't have these like coping skills, and haven't really been guided in a way to have these coping skills, you know. And then the state of the world. The state of the world is that we're in a transition right now. We heard Vanessa talk about like climate change and all the things, all the ways that our territories and the planet is changing. And so the dust, even if we don't acknowledge it every day, is a stressor within our bodies that we're carrying with us. So this leads to them, the youth and the children, being diagnosed with these different mental illnesses. So these are some of the most common ones: anxiety, depression, oppositional defiance disorder, conduct disorder, ADHD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not just, you know, a lot of these are not just for children and youth, that there are so many of us, and all of us, you know, to a certain extent have PTSD. And then substance abuse, you know, reaching for something to feel better in the moment. And then we have, you know, how does this show up in the classroom? It shows up in two main ways: of externalized stress or internalized stress. And so the externalized stress is where you start to see them acting out. They have outbursts and anger. And it's just that emotion that's coming out that there's no outlet, right? They're just trying to like release the pressure valve from some of that stress. And then there's the internal stress of shutting down. So that shutdown that happens when they're silent, when they don't make eye contact with you, when they're not engaged, or when they go straight to their phone. You know, phone and music for youth can be a way of just kind of coming back into balance. And it helps them, for better or for worse, right? It helps them to come back into this balance that they're looking for. So how do we find this balance? We talked about being in survival mode. You know, all of us are coming here with intergenerational trauma. Our ancestors were in the boarding schools, the smallpox. We've survived so many different genocides, the physical, the spiritual, everything has been taken. We've been, you know, relocated from our lands, some of us and many of us, right? And so this is a lot of trauma. It's a lot of trauma for our bodies to be holding, right? And so what is it that we need a little bit extra? We need to take care of ourselves even extra so that we can just come back into balance. And you know, we talk about balance so much, but it's so many things that it's so complex to be able to come into this balance. And so in the realms of talking about mental health and talking about food, it's hard to talk about mental health and food without talking about first sleep and exercise. So I wanted to mention those to start. And so in this book that Matthew Walker wrote, Why We Sleep, he says that we need at least 7.5 hours of sleep every single night. And the chances of us needing less than that are chances of us being struck by lightning. So making sure, first and foremost, making sure that folks are sleeping, and within the medical realm of things too, in the medical industrial complex, like one of the first things that we look at for mental health is how are folks sleeping and are they on any substances? Those are the two starting points that we look at to really start to assess like where folks are at in their health. And definitely we'll talk a little bit more about sleep and how it's involved with our mental health as well. Exercise. So walking 20 minutes a day is the equivalent of taking an anti-inflammatory, so like an ibuprofen or something like that. So making sure that we're getting out and we're walking. If we're able to walk with our children, with the youth, even if it's doing a little bit of stretching and movement within the classroom several times during the day, that helps doing that breath work, doing that exercise really helps us to bring down the inflammation and also like our nervous system down. 15 minutes a day, reduced mortality by 14%, and it extended life expectancy by 3 years. So if you're walking really just to help for your health, you can start with 15 minutes. 20 minutes takes it to another level, anti-inflammatory. 30 minutes takes it to an even another level that is more for fitness, more for training and fitness. And in this photo you see here, that's my husband Hera, and he's with the youth and they're playing music as a way to balance their nervous systems naturally, because we have that capacity again to do this for ourselves and each other, including through co-regulation. So a little bit about neurotransmitters. There is a thing called stress gut, and I'm not going to go too much into it. But basically what happens is since we need so much time to develop the enzymes to digest new foods that are coming. So post-colonial foods like cheese and lactose and milk and gluten, wheat, all of these things are impacting our people because we don't have those enzymes to process those foods. And so what happens is it gets stuck in our gut, and when those things aren't fully processed, it just starts to cause congestion. It gives us irritable bowel syndrome. And that is super important because 90% of our serotonin receptors are located in the gut. Now, what do we use serotonin for? One, it's for sleep. We just talked about why sleep is so important. It helps us to modulate our sleep, our appetite, moods. It helps to decrease pain. It helps us digest food. In a spiritual sense, that's where we are digesting our emotions as well, right? A lot comes from our stomach. And so being able to have teas that help to balance our nervous system, anything that focuses on balancing the stomach also helps us to slow down and take that time to process what we need to. And then the serotonin also affects our good bacteria to decrease inflammation and to increase our digestion so that we can continue to digest things. And so this is super important because in a medical sense, all of these things that the children have, whether it's anxiety or depression, a majority of those are going to be modulated with a SSRI, what we call SSRI. So it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what that does is it blocks some of the receptors in the brain so that more of the serotonin is available, which helps to boost our mood and to help us to regulate our sleep. Now, that is intrinsically connected. That serotonin is intrinsically connected to melatonin, which helps us to go to sleep, which helps us to produce the serotonin, right? So it's all connected, and that melatonin specifically is being affected by blue light. So every time we're looking at a computer or a phone that doesn't have a blue light blocker, what that means is that's equivalent to us looking at noonday sun. So for thousands of years, our bodies have been on the cycle of the sun and the moon, right? The cycle. And looking at the fire, which also allows us to take in phosphorus and different minerals through our eyes and to help us balance our nervous system. When we were at the ISCDC, the Indigenous Sustainable Communities Design course, we slept with the sun. We were up all day with the sun, and then we slept, during the night. And we were there for 2 weeks, and just having our nervous systems experience that was another feeling completely. I felt more energized. I mean, it was incredible. And a lot of that has to do with the blue light that we're ingesting. So if we really have to try to either use some blue light glasses that help, or some of the computers now have blue light filters. You can look those up. And that helps a little bit because it's really hard for our system to fall asleep if it thinks that we're looking at noonday sun, 2 hours before we're supposed to be going to sleep. And so a lot of the youth are having a lot more sleeping troubles, and adults alike, right? Because we stay on these gadgets most of the day. So what's sugar got to do with it? So as we are looking at processed sugar and the role of processed sugar, sugar has many names, first of all. It has over 70 different names on the packages on our processed foods. The most common is high fructose corn syrup. And there's also sucrose and dextrose and galactose, all kinds of things, the fructose as well. So these are all different names for processed sugars that are affecting our body in a very different way. And why is that important to know? It's important to know because it is affecting the serotonin that we're talking about. It's affecting the dopamine. It's affecting our neurotransmitters in a way that is very similar to addiction, substance addiction. And so the sugar actually does hit on the mu opiate receptors. So the mu are the opiate receptors in our brain that are stimulated by heroin, morphine, all of these other more intense, and also the controlled substances that are given, like after you're given an operation, oxycodone, all those kinds of things. Those are also going to hit the mu opiate receptors. And so we are seeing this study, the evidence for sugar addiction, behavioral and neurochemical effects of intermittent, excessive, and sugar intake, is a study that was done on rats and in 2007. And it shows that when you're binging on sugar, the same physiological effects are happening as when you binge on a drug. And so it's really important for us to really understand why sugar is so toxic for our youth. There are other studies as well that are out there that talk about how when folks are detoxing from any kind of substances, that they have a higher sugar intake. Same thing with alcohol. When you're coming off of alcohol, you're eating more sugar. Why? Because it connects to those mu opiate receptors to make you feel good, and your mu receptors get changed once you've been on a substance. Once you're dependent on a substance, it gets changed. So sugar helps to do that. And there is some studies out there that even say, could sugar predispose our youth to alcohol? There already, our Native American community is already in a higher percentage bracket of alcoholism, and that alcohol and sugar, that interplay that they have, because alcohol does have high levels of sugar, it's so similar in our bodies. And so it's something that we really need to really consider and talk about. Why is sugar important? So how is sugar different? So this processed sugar that we talk about, how is it different from our traditional sugars? And so these are different sugars from the Americas, right? The processed sugar really comes from sugar cane on the right. So the difference, though, is that processed sugar is 95% sugar and 0.5% water. So when you are ingesting processed sugar, the amount of sugar that you're ingesting is so much more than when you are ingesting sugarcane, for example. And why is that? Because sugarcane is only 10 to 15% sugar, and the rest of it is water and fiber and enzymes and vitamins and minerals, things that our body needs, things that our body helps to balance out that sugar intake. Honey, for example, also is a traditional way of taking in sugar. You can add it to your teas and to your desserts. It is not just sugar by itself either. It also has carbohydrates, fats, good proteins, vitamin C, vitamin B5 and 6, copper, iron, potassium, zinc, antioxidants. For our region, mesquite is a source of protein. It's a really good source of protein here in these areas. It gets really dry, it gets really hot, it gets really dry. The mesquite, since the colonization, the mesquite has blown up because the cows and the goats eat it and they leave it in their droppings. And so we have more mesquite around, and it's 13% protein and 36% sucrose, carbohydrates, calcium, iron, minerals. I've been incorporating mesquite a little bit more into our tortillas, into our atoles, into different things that we make. And it makes things really sweet and delicious, but it also provides that protein. So it's a combination, and we'll see in just a second why that's so important. And then we have, for our relatives up in the north, I saw that there were some Seneca folks on, and from the Great Lakes as well, that maple syrup, right? That maple syrup is that awakening of Mother Earth. It signifies where we are. It helps us to wake up, right, from and our transition of our seasons. It does have more, when compared to honey, it has more fats. It has more good fats that our body's taking in, vitamin B1 and B2, antioxidants, zinc, calcium, potassium, magnesium. One thing about magnesium that is really important is that if folks are not able to sleep and they come into the pharmacy wanting like a sleep aid, the first thing that I give them, even before melatonin, and by the way, usually people can start at a 3 milligram melatonin dose, and that's all that they need for like 2 weeks to help balance out your system. The magnesium at 400 milligrams, if that's how you're getting it at the pharmacy, that helps to bring everything down in your body. It's needed for your heart, but also for your muscles to relax at the end of the day. And it's something that was highly recommended during COVID as well, because it helps your body overall to function better day to day. When we're on these in survival mode, in flight or flight, our magnesium, when we take it, it helps our bodies to relax and come back into balance. So what's happening with the sugar, and why is it so important for us to stabilize the sugar? So we saw that it can have dependency or addictive effects. That dependency works very similar to drug dependencies. And this is a slide that shows a little bit more what that looks like. So what happens, the green line here is the ideal blood sugar that we want to stay in, but what happens is that we have a little snack. Maybe it's cereal sugar in the morning, and so that sugar, because it's processed, because it's 99.5% sugar and doesn't have all the other things in it, it spikes us and it helps us to feel good and energized and wake up. But then when the insulin comes to shuttle it back, it can overcompensate a little bit with the insulin, and then that has us crash and feel really crabby and tired. And so we are on this roller coaster time and time again, right, of just, maybe we wait too long to eat, and so our sugar crashes, and then we eat too much sugar, and so then it spikes us again. And this is really, really tough on our bodies. It's not only tough on our bodies, but it's also tough on our minds. I'm seeing some folks share in the chat. Agave nectar, yes, is also a great substitute, and it tastes great in wasabi. What would be sold as maple syrup? Yes, so we'll get to these questions in the end. I really like all this conversation that's happening. The corn syrup and the maple. And I like how y'all are thinking about, the blood sugar spikes, and we're going to put that into context here with the next slide. So before we go there, we have another breakout. What do you do when your sugar is feeling low? And what would you have to do to eat every 3 to 4 hours so that you're not coming into these really high spikes and low spikes? One thing that we can do is get ahead of it. So if we're eating every 3 to 4 hours, even something small, what is it that you can do for yourself to be eating at that schedule? And what can you do for your students to be eating in that schedule? Because that really is the difference between us thinking and being hard on ourselves and the students thinking like, why am I not getting this? I'm not, I can't focus. I have ADHD, all of these things, and shifting them into, I may not be able to do this, but it helps to ground. When you have your sugar stable, it helps to stabilize your mind and that ability to think and concentrate as well. So we'll just take a few minutes for this breakout question. Bethany, if you can help us with those breakout rooms. What does your body feel like when your blood sugar is low? And what do you have to do to eat every 3 to 4 hours? And how can you have your students eat on that same schedule? Welcome back, everyone. We have about 15 minutes left, so I wanted to see if folks could chat one way that they will, maybe one way that they feel, how you know that your body is dropping, and how do, you know, maybe how does that change your mind, change the way you're thinking, your concentration, your mood, and or any innovative ideas on how to start eating more regularly to stay within this realm. I see Jaylen's hands up. Would you like to share?
Hi. Yes. Yeah. Thank you
Hey.
so much. My name is Jaylen. I live in Gallup, New Mexico, and we work with the Dene people and the Zuni Pueblo. I work at Four Corners Detox and Recovery Center. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what you just said. I have a lot of chronic health conditions, but one of them being pretty severe fibromyalgia. And I've had it since I was about 10. None of the treatments that I ever tried ever really gave me relief until I changed the way I ate. And it was fascinating to see how when I excluded gluten, dairy, and artificial sweeteners and sugar, how much better my body felt. My brain felt clearer, my muscle spasms and my pain some days were completely non-existent. And, you know, when people would say, well, what are you doing for your fibro? My answer would be, I'm eating like I love myself. And so that's, I will say that as someone who had to completely change her lifestyle, you know, I grew up with frozen dinners and with commodity foods. And, you know, we live in a really rural area. So having all of those, I did feel how it made my body feel. And it is quite a huge difference to eat like you love yourself. But not everyone has that privilege. And it is being in a rural area, unless you are from a rural area, you really don't understand the food disparity that happens.
Mm. Powerful testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
So real. It's so real. All the inflammation that causes in our body, and then how that just disappears when we change how we eat. And I think, and that also kind of links in with here in the chat, I was noticing that Katana had said that I remember in our commodities growing up, corn syrup was always given, crazy. And then Caroline said, yes, Katana, my dad always just threw it out. He said it made sticky blood. Wonderful insights. Is there anyone that was able to like create a schedule for themselves of how to eat every 3 to 4 hours?
I don't have a schedule. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I don't have a schedule, but I do work with patients. So I'm a dietitian at Nevada Urban Indians. And I've kind of used some intuitive eating principles with people. So it's like really responding to your hunger and fueling your body. So eating foods that make you feel better. But definitely like responding to your hunger and fullness signals is a really big deal, because so many times we can be out of touch with that, especially if we're eating for emotional reasons. So that was just my input. Thank you.
Yeah. Embodiment. Thank you, Alyssa, for sharing about embodiment and how being able to know when we're hungry and acknowledge that. It's a little bit harder when we're on our phones or we're in our head, right? Doing work. How are we checking in with ourselves? And then it looks like Laquana wanted to share as well. Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I really love that share about like intuitive eating and being mindful of our body's signals and what feels good in our bodies. I think definitely a lot of that has been like routine for me as of late. And also like being mindful of like thinking ahead or pre-packing snacks for work or for my day, whatever I might be doing. So that if I eat breakfast in the morning and then by 10:30, I'm hungry again, I'll be able to like grab a yogurt, grab a snack, grab an apple, grab a banana, grab like those kind of, trail mix or almonds, whatever kind of snacks that I have. And I kind of keep them here in my drawer so that I don't like, have to wait until I'm able to eat lunch, that I'm able to like grab a quick snack. And I'm like really honoring my body in those moments, even if I'm like in the middle of a meeting, to be able to take care of myself, because like if I'm not present, if I'm hungry, I'm not present. And so, yeah, I'll like be able to like pre-pack my snacks and kind of schedule my meals so I'm able to take care of myself in that way.
Mhm. Yes. So having snacks throughout the day, even if we forget, and like, oh, we're past our time or we're hungry all of a sudden, at least we have something there. And how can we do that for our youth, for our children? How can we have the tribal systems, the school district, whoever, start to make that the norm, right? That there's always food available for our students. Kia also shared ways that their youth programs teach snack preparation using native plants, Douglas fir tips, and baking recipes. And then we have a lot of really great insight in the chat as well. And then someone talked about, Jaylyn also said, teaching children to eat until you are full rather than finish everything on your plate. Katana, go ahead.
One thing in our breakout session that I brought up was the school system and the food. How even from when I was in school, so like one generation change, it's a lot different. It's a lot of process. It's a lot of already prepackaged stuff. They don't really get snacks. My son gets to take water, a couple water bottles, because I really push to drink water while he's at school to stay hydrated. And then my high schooler, he it's kind of the same thing. Sometimes he just doesn't even eat lunch because he says he didn't like what the meal was. And so we try our best to look at ahead of what the meals are, and if they want to make their own lunch and things like that. But I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like our school systems need to incorporate a lot more different holistic well-being stuff other than just academics for that, like the stretching and the snacks and the more healthier foods. And so I really focus on just being able to control what we eat at dinner. That's the one meal I can control. And I just really focus on trying to control that meal and make sure we get fruits and vegetables with our dinner. So that's all.
Thank you for that share. What you're talking about is super important. It's like we go to hospitals to heal and schools to learn, and then they feed us junk. They feed us processed food, whatever's the cheapest that has high fructose corn syrup. And how are we supposed to heal? How are we supposed to learn in those environments? And that's something that I'm also seeing in these classes, how we can draft with all this data that we're looking at for the students in the schools, draft a letter so that each one of you in your own settings can share that with the administration, that this is scientifically backed of why our children need this and why we all need this, to be healthy, as ways of supporting, because I know as an educator, you're overwhelmed with so many things already. I'm not trying to give y'all extra work. We're trying to support our kids, support our youth to have more than just that one meal that's healthy in their day. So thank you for that. I have a few more slides, but it's 3 till, so I will save those for next time. Basically, what we'll go on to and share is if we eat a combination of foods, protein, specifically protein, fats, and carbohydrates together. I saw some folks talking about sugar spikes with maple syrup as well, and it's true, maple syrup has sugar, so it can also spike if you're eating it by itself. But if you're eating it in combination with a good protein and a good fat, since that will be your carbohydrate, technically already has fat, when you have a balanced meal like that, and it's coming from and incorporates your traditional foods, whether it's one or whether it's all traditional foods, that is what's going to help us to stabilize these the blood sugars, and also to help us feel better in our bodies and our mood, and allow us the students to focus and to be at their best, and to learn more effectively, more efficiently. And so that'll be to come. We're going to be sharing more about like the protein, fat, carbohydrate balance, what that looks like, and then give a few examples of traditional foods. There's an Anishinaabe food pyramid that was developed by the diabetes program. Eating seasonally, why is that important? And then what does that look like to eat all of our foods on our land? That Yurok sister, I wonder if you all have a map of all of your foods and the seasons and things like that. I think are really important for us to see and share and remember, and they can be really fun interactive activities that we can do with our children as well. They can pick one of the foods out of the hat and then research that food, and then we all create this map together of our territory. So this is just insight for what's to come. I'm really excited and thankful that you all got to interact, that you all got to also share a lot of your wisdom and what you're experiencing on the ground in your territories. There's a lot of things that are similar and different, right, for all of us. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for your time. There was someone that asked for a resource for ways to connect with each other. And so I will work with Dr. Bays to see how we can make sure that folks get each other's contact. And Bethany, is there anything else that you want to add, Bethany?
I don't believe so. I think this is just the last slide. If you haven't been able to click on the link I put in the chat, you can also scan this code as just like a post-presentation survey to give any feedback. We'd really appreciate that. But are there any final questions?
When is the next session?
It will be next week at the same time, I believe.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, in 2 Thursdays, and we're moving the time from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So I hope that that's still doable for everyone. Ooh, we need to talk to Tia. Our big native hospital in Alaska has served almost 1.5 million meals of traditional foods, mostly donated in the last 8 years. Schools up here are trying to serve more traditional foods too. Yes. Folks are talking about, yes, there's so much information in the chat. Thank you all for being so interactive and sharing your wisdom. Capiche. Naletsam. Thank you all. Hope you all have a wonderful day. I can put I'll put my contact in the chat as well. I will be here every 2 weeks at 2 p.m. and we will go more in depth with the balancing the sugars, working with our students, interactive ways for them to connect to storytelling through the foods, making food maps together. And also like, how do we make time to make these foods? How are we walking the walk of this prayer, showing up for ourselves before we show up for our people and everyone else, So I really look forward to this amazing share that gathering that we have even through virtually. I'm so thankful to be connected to all of you from Alaska down to Florida. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.